Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Introduce myself. I'm Jerry Stokes, the Chief of the Salisbury Police Department. As you may recall, I announced Salisbury Police would conduct an internal review of our response to the multiple victim shooting at Thelma's restaurant on January 25th, 26th of this year. The review was completed by our Professional Standards Division and provided to me on March the 7th. On March the 13th, I reviewed the report with the Chief's Citizen Policy Advisory Board. They provided input and feedback on the review. I have since discussed the report with the city manager and my senior department leadership. It was my intention to release the information the week of March 16th, but the virus crisis has monopolized our time and energy, so I had to delay a formal release. To ensure this information isn't too long being provided publicly as I promised, I'm providing the review in a slightly different manner than a normal press conference today. So let me go over the points of the review, and then I'll try to answer a few questions. A recap of the incident that night. Just after midnight on Saturday, January 25th, into the morning of Sunday, January 26th, 6 students from our 2 colleges, Livingstone and Catawba, were shot during a party at Thelma's down-home cooking restaurant at 1935 Jake Alexander Boulevard. There were 2 seriously injured victims and 4 lesser injured victims. Additionally, 2 people were injured during the ensuing rush to exit the building by a large crowd. Some questions arose about what SPD knew and when and how we responded to that information. This review clarifies for me what we did prior, during, and after the event, and I hope that this clarifies for our community as well. Now let me go through the information. It was by chance that we were working that officers were working a specialist task force seeking intelligence information on unrelated shootings in the city during the month of January. It was by chance that officers came across a social media post announcing the party and they were familiar with a fight after a similar party on August 23rd, 2019. I need to clarify, in January I stated the prior party was in September. It was on August 23rd and not in September. No officer ever raised concern or gathered any information indicating there would be an act of violence at the party. The officers raised a concern that this was a second party and there had been difficulty with a large group fighting, which required chemical spray to disperse. Those concerns were made known to at 2 police department informal briefings related to the Special Assignment Task Force. These briefings were not completely focused on the Thelma restaurant party. Officers noted that Livingstone and Catawba students were sharing and commenting on the post, so they assumed that there would be a heavy presence of students at the party. This was not particularly concerning, just something that they noted, and there again was no indication that there would be violence committed by anyone, particularly any of the students. Officers spoke to Thelma Lucky twice prior to the party on the January 15th and January 23rd. Her response was that she intended to hold the party. Officers did not state to her there would be impending violence, as they didn't know that a shooting would occur. They did express concerns about the fight that occurred on August 23rd and did not want a similar incident to occur again. A person who identified herself as the party sponsor requested a single Salisbury Police Department officer for an off-duty assignment on the night of the party. One officer worked the event and was asked to monitor the parking lot, escort the party sponsor when taking money from the location, and come inside to address any issues that she had. The officer was not requested to monitor any activity inside, just to come in on request if a problem started. He was also told the party sponsor would provide door security to pat down attendees before entry. The officer did note that as more people showed up at the door and the line backed up, the pat-down stopped. Salisbury PD solicited assistance from alcohol law enforcement, or ALE, because there was suspected alcohol involved in the August 25th incident. There is no ABC permit issued for the business and no special permit was requested. ALE agreed to assist and coordinate with Salisbury PD officers during the event. The officers and the agent made 2 arrests in the parking lot over the course of the night, and Lucky was notified of the issues being seen in the parking lot that night. The night shift patrol team was aware of the concerns about the party due to the prior incident, because just by chance they happened to be the same patrol team that was working on August the 23rd and responded to that incident. The supervisors had also attended the briefings where the concern over the party was discussed. The supervisor went over plans in the pre-shift briefing with all officers about how to respond to another large fight. The off-duty officer noted another event was going on at the same time in another part of the mall, but the event ended at 10 o'clock. The party was scheduled to start about 10 o'clock. I don't feel that there was any danger to those people, as most everyone had left by the time the party started, and there was no information that violence would occur. No indication to me that we needed to make any contact or notice to those party event goers that something may occur. Officers had responded to assist the off-duty officers with dealing with an unrelated dispute between the attendees and the party sponsor when the shooting occurred. There were several officers in the parking lot as the shots happened in the building and were able to quickly take action and get inside the building. The ensuing scene was extremely chaotic as patrons rushed to exit the building through the restaurant exterior doors and by breaking out the doors leading into the mall proper area. You can imagine how chaotic it was as 2 people were injured in the rush to exit the building. Officers were unable to identify anyone who fired the shots and gave quick attention to locating victims and securing the scene so no additional shots were fired. This was accomplished by facilitating the exit of the patrons both out of the building and out of the parking lot. Officers located the most seriously injured victim and transported him in a patrol car to the ER. The victim was taken by patrol car due to the scene being so unstable and for EMS to actually come in. And remember, the EMS was still responding. Officers were immediately there because they happened to be in the parking lot, and they felt that obviously that the victim's obvious injuries needed immediate attention, so they felt transporting him was the best option, and I agree with that. I feel like that likely saved his life by getting him to the ER quickly. Once victims began to arrive by either the personal car, ambulance, or was the case for one victim, the Salisbury PD patrol car, we had concerns about security at the ER. It is our protocol to coordinate with Novant Security to lock down the ER to prevent adversaries arriving and disputes arising in the ER. Officers therefore responded to the ER to assist with security there. While there, officers began to notify the student victims' parents, and we called Livingstone and Catawba Security to assist in notifying their administration. Representatives of both college security departments came to the ER and remained for much of the time. Salisbury PD was there as well. The investigation into this shooting is continuing. Detectives are working the case as we speak. Let me provide an overview of what has been reported by the internal review. A pre-event critique. The after-action review report noted the following was done well by Salisbury PD pre-event. The event was recognized as a potential credible threat to public safety because of the August 23rd incident. That information was presented in 2 briefings to other Salisbury PD staff. The on-duty patrol team had a response plan should a fight occur, which helped in their shooting response that evening. The after-action review noted the following that could have been done better by the Salisbury PD pre-event. No officer completed a report for the August 23rd incident, therefore detailed information was not readily available in Salisbury PD records. There was no clear communication flow or procedure for any event or information that presents a credible public safety threat. There is no current intelligence gathering function within Salisbury PD to look for these types of events that present a public safety concern or identify individuals or group of individuals in an effort to anticipate, prevent, or monitor possible criminal activity. Command staff, including myself, were present in the briefings regarding the potential threat, but were not involved in the response planning. No information about this event was communicated outside of Salisbury PD to either other law enforcement, the Salisbury Fire Department, or the Rowan County Emergency Medical Services, or other entities that could have had a need to know. While Salisbury PD was aware the mall was owned by Rowan County government, there was no communication with the landlord about the concerns regarding the property. There is no formal means of calling into play the remedial action program or whether that tool that can be used to address such an event. The remedial action program may have the authority to provide information to a landlord in these circumstances, may have no authority to provide information to a landlord in these circumstances, as the purpose is to identify residential rental location with high police response and assist or address landlords with remedies, but that has not been explored to clarify whether this program has the ability to address concerns before they happen. During and after event critique, the after action review noted the following was done well by Salisbury PD during and after the event. By chance, the supervisors were on the scene and took command of the scene quickly. A policy of having a senior officer on duty of lieutenant rank during the weekends provides a command person there to afford an immediate incident command and control of a significant event such as that. Officers made an immediate entry, which likely limited the number of shots fired. Officers were in control of their use of force. We did not use any force during this incident. In an overly crowded area, had any officers fired a shot, they could have struck an unintended person, so they were controlled in what they did. As we were calling in fire and EMS to the scene, there was good coordination in how to bring them into the scene. A victim was identified as needing immediate care, and there was no delay getting that person to the ER for treatment. Again, that action likely saved his life. Officers did not stop once they cleared the restaurant building, but continued to search for any victims and suspects in the immediate area, to include the mall, inside the mall or in the exterior of the mall. The after action review noted the following as could have been done better during and after the event. Officers found that they had difficulty holding weapons and flashlights simultaneously. Weapons, to include rifles and handguns, have no lights mounted on them. Officers had trouble getting their rifles from the racks in the patrol cars because of the locking mechanism was too difficult to unlatch. Officers had insufficient first aid kits. They are issued tourniquets and the typical Band-Aid or Boy Scout type first aid kit. The victim taken to the hospital was not injured in a manner a tourniquet would have helped. The officers had no compression type bandages or bleeding control products that are normally found in a military type trauma kit. The relatively young and inexperienced officers on the Salisbury PD force found themselves not as prepared as they felt they should have been when responding to this type of incident or event. The officer commented that basic law enforcement training never prepared me for this. The officers felt they need more training in response to an active threat situation. The officers had difficulty carrying the victim to their patrol car for transport. They had no stretcher of any sort to use to carry them. There was no understanding of how to recognize an overcrowded event venue and whether the building capacity was exceeded or not, and if that could have been known to any certainty, and no procedure of how to handle that situation had it even been recognized. Officers had no vendor or other means of cleaning blood from the patrol car used to transport the victim other than normal cleaning products such as paper towels, which is not sufficient for larger blood spills. The officers do not have sufficient personal protective equipment for cleaning such a spill safely to avoid bloodborne pathogen exposure. The initial media information was somewhat incorrect. Salisbury PD stated there was a lack of cooperation. That really wasn't true when stated. We also released too much detailed information on the condition of the most seriously injured victim, which should have been more general than specific. The media information flow was limited even after a number of concerns that were known from the public, and several days passed before there was a press conference that I held to clarify and provide details that could have helped alleviate any public concern. We have several recommendations after this review, and I'll now review those recommendations from the assessment. This is our plan moving forward and that we have developed. Equipment needs such as trauma kits, weapon-mounted lights, and battlefield-type stretchers are needed. Had officers confronted a shooter, they carry a limited supply of ammo. A go bag should be provided as a means of carrying trauma kits and extra ammo into a scene if needed. Current issued body armor vests are not capable of stopping a rifle round. There was not a rifle used that evening. Just want to make sure I clarify that. It was just some of the thoughts that came out of that should a future event involve a rifle. A heavier duty vest can be obtained to provide a greater ballistic protection, which can be carried in the police vehicle and placed over the issued vest if responding to an assailant with a rifle. These equipment-related matters are not currently funded in the Salisbury PD budget. It's not known when any of those items can be purchased and deployed, but we are actively looking for grants to supply those items. Salisbury PD will increase active violence response techniques training to meet the needs of the workforce that doesn't have experience or a full understanding of those techniques. Salisbury PD will examine what controls are needed to be put in place for off-duty jobs and department controls over what officers are working. There are concerns about officers being employed for a party of this type and being complicit in illegal alcohol sales or really any illegal activity, but a competing concern that police presence can serve to limit issues. We'll seek to implement a policy that strikes a good balance with both of those. Salisbury PD will examine a policy for determining what are public safety credible threats and a means of communicating that information internally and externally, and what staff will have responsibility for implementing that policy. Salisbury PD will determine the best practice to respond to an identified credible public safety threat and how to inform a property owner of those concerns. The remedial action program will be used as necessary if there is authority to do so within that program. Salisbury PD will develop a procedure for handling issues such as occupancy violations, which are the purview of other city departments or county departments, and how to address those matters in after hours. Salisbury PD has been bolstering staff use and training in incident command and unifying command with both Salisbury Fire Department and County EMS and County Emergency Management. We'll continue to develop those skills and provide enhancement training in any identified areas. Salisbury PD is seeking to employ a second analyst tasked with intelligence information gathering and dissemination department-wide. There will be a need to ensure that the operational components push information they acquire to the analyst for the dissemination internally and externally. Once the analyst is hired, Salisbury PD will develop policy and procedure for implementing this recommendation effectively. Salisbury PD has identified 2 vendors to provide bloodborne pathogen cleaning of vehicles or even the headquarters building in a significant blood spill or other situation that's specialized cleaning is needed. Salisbury PD will develop a policy for information release to the press that policy will encompass what can be shared to protect victim rights, investigations into crimes, and fair trials for accused persons. The policy will balance the need or right to know with the rights of those that we serve. Salisbury PD and command staff will maintain transparency in all operational aspects and will have processes in place to identify community concerns that can be addressed by providing greater information through press conferences, citizen engagement opportunities, social media, or other digital media means. This includes a greater reliance on the Chief's Citizen Policy Advisory Board to communicate community concerns that need to be addressed. All personnel will be encouraged to communicate to the Salisbury PD command staff any concerns they learn from community members that need to be addressed. Salisbury PD will implement a policy of conducting after-action reviews such as this of major or significant incidents to enhance our operational capabilities. The policies will address what incidents will be reviewed and how those recommendations will be used. That summarizes our review. It is my intention to post the summary on our website and have it available in the near future. I will now address any questions that anyone has.
Media members, please feel free to share your questions in the comment section on the post. Chief, we have a question from Siobhan Potts at the Salisbury Post. Will the after-incident review be available for the media?
Yes, I intend to post that on the website pretty soon after this conference.
Billie Jean Shaw from WCNC. Has a suspect been identified?
The case is still active and detectives are working the case as we speak. I'm unable to comment right now about any potential suspects because it is an ongoing criminal investigation.
Chief, we have a question from the general public. The question is, why are the arcades still allowed? I'll allow you to answer that.
The arcades? Not sure what the question relates to this might be, but I believe the governor's executive order specifically states that the arcades must be closed now. If the question relates to why are arcades still in operation, has been reported quite a bit in the local media that the sheriff's office has a number of active investigations into the arcades. We're cooperating with the sheriff's office, but they are the lead agency investigating those, and there are a number that have been closed down.
And we have another question from the general public. What is going to happen now?
So again, we have a list of recommendations. We'll work through that recommendations. Again, the equipment needs are something we're going to have to seek grant funding for. The training we will provide to our force over time. As you can imagine, that takes a bit to get through all the officers, get them through the training that we need. To do that, we actually provide the training periodically, just probably not as often as we need to or had needed to since we have a number of new folks on board. So Our training coordinator is looking at scheduling those as soon as we're able to get everybody back into one place to go over training. That's not something that you can do remotely, so that sort of training was delayed just a little bit because of the virus situation. The other things such as the policies and procedures, we are a CALEA accredited agency, so we're working closely with CALEA to develop proper policies that adhere to those standards and that address the needs that we have to have in place for in the future to avoid any sort of incident like this or concern like this as we go forward. So we are currently working on that, and all those recommendations are being reviewed and trying to develop good timelines to get everything in place. It's not something that we can do overnight. And again, unfortunately, the virus situation has been a little bit of a delay on some of the things.
And we have another question from Siobhan from the Post. Are these changes or new policies effective immediately, or at least those that don't require funding?
Certainly, as we develop the policies and kind of review those and make sure that they fit within our accreditation or Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agency standards, we have to review that and make sure they are within those standards. So it takes a little bit, but as soon as we kind of have those finalized, they are somewhat immediately in place. Now, there are a number of things on there that we can start to do as our practice and not necessarily quite have written down right now. We are really trying to actively work on a means of pushing information around and of course the suggestion that command staff involved in planning, that's something that we are trying to get in place, but we want to have clear guidelines on doing that. But I feel like we're doing much better now with that and have begun to do that more frequently now.
And so we have a question from Billie Jean from WCNC. Will a press release on today's update be sent to the media later?
Yes, we can send out a press release that includes the information that we talked about.
And Siobhan from the Post has another question. If you haven't said this, who conducted the internal investigation, SPD or an outside agency?
We did it internally. We have a detective that is assigned as our professional standards detective whose job is to review citizen complaints and that sort of thing, so internal affairs. And there's a captain that's over that function currently. And those two teamed up to review, and what that involved was talking to the people that were involved in the event and just gathering information and bringing all that information together. And they are both very familiar with our policy, procedure, and practices, and going through and reviewing the information and comparing it to what our policies are and seeing where there were gaps in that sort of issue.
And so a member of the public would like to know, will she be able to reopen the restaurant?
That I'm unable to say. That's a decision that doesn't involve Salisbury PD. We're not involved in that, and nor are we. Her landlord would be able to provide any insight into that.
Mr. Vaughn, we do note your question. We can certainly answer that question at a later time. Are there any additional media questions?
Okay, that's all that we have today. I appreciate everyone joining us, and again, a little bit unconventional manner, but we wanted to make sure that we got the information out, and thank you very much.
And Chief, will you be able to answer additional questions from the media later today as well?
Certainly, yes.